Welcome to the WWE Podcast, your number one source for the latest in WWE news and straightforward analysis. Are you ready to get this thing going?
Give me a hell yeah! I said give me a hell yeah!
Then let's get this show started right now.
Welcome back to another edition of the SmackDown Review here on the WWE Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Michael Ritter. You can find me on Twitter at Michael5Ritter. And today we're going to be talking about the SmackDown that aired on February 12th, 2021. This was a pretty eventful SmackDown. There was quite a bit that happened tonight as far as, we had Seth Rollins make his much anticipated return. Me personally, I can speak for myself. I was definitely waiting for him to come back. He adds a lot to the SmackDown roster. Whenever the draft happened, obviously he was their second pick in the entire thing, a first-round pick, obviously. So he is a big part of what they want to do and what they can do whenever he's at their disposal. So having him back is definitely a good thing. And of course, we had the women's tag team champions Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler make their appearance. I definitely have a little bit to say about that. We will certainly get there later on in the episode. And then, of course, we had the Elimination Chamber for the SmackDown side of things announced tonight and the participants who will be inside of the chamber. So there's quite a bit to cover as far as the SmackDown episode itself. We will definitely get to that. And, of course, for those of you who want a little bit of bonus content at the very end of the episode, like usual, I will have a top 5 for you guys this week. It's going to be the top 5 pay-per-views that WWE should bring back. These are the pay-per-views or the pay-per-view names that have been retired over the years. Some of them have come back. I'm not sure if they're back for the long haul or if they were just kind of one-off things, but nonetheless, a few of them are back, and I will definitely be mentioning them whenever the top 5 comes around later on in the episode. That'll be later, though. Before we get there, we will cover SmackDown in its entirety like we normally do. And before we get there, guys, I want to once again thank you for choosing to listen to this. If you're a first-time listener, thank you for choosing this podcast. I know there are several options out there for you, so the fact that you clicked on this, I am definitely appreciative, grateful, however you want to look at it. It definitely means a lot to me. And if you're a regular listener, thank you for making this part of your weekly routine. I hope that this episode will not disappoint, and you will want to come back again next week as we will continue to make our way towards Elimination Chamber, WrestleMania. Things are definitely starting to heat up and get pretty juicy. I'm definitely looking forward to WrestleMania at Raymond James Stadium with fans there for the first time. I feel like that's going to be a pretty exciting moment. I haven't really looked into if they're going to have fans there for both days. I assume they would. That's something that I should definitely probably look at. But either way, I'm definitely excited. That's what I'm looking forward to. Of course, I'm looking forward to the pay-per-views between there as well. But I don't know, something about having fans there for the first time in nearly a year. That's something that, I'm not going to be there, but I'm excited for those fans. I'm excited to get to hear them. I'm excited to get to see it on my TV, see how the wrestlers react to it as well. So that's definitely something to look forward to whenever we get there. But that's not tonight. The reason you guys are here is for the SmackDown review, so we're going to get to that right now. And this episode started like most do, like with Roman Reigns coming out to the ring with Paul Heyman and Jey Uso. And this time, Adam Pearce was actually waiting for them in the ring with a contract in his hand that apparently stated that Roman Reigns will have to defend his Universal Championship inside of the Elimination Chamber next Sunday. Paul Heyman is very quick to correct him and say that the contract actually states that the Universal Championship only has to be defended at Elimination Chamber and not necessarily inside of the chamber itself. And then Adam Pearce, decides to drop the bombshell on Roman Reigns by saying that he'll actually have to be defending his championship against the winner of that SmackDown Elimination Chamber match. And he announces that the first 2 participants in the chamber and the only 2 who don't have to qualify for the match are Jey Uso and Kevin Owens. So what I took from that, which was, it was a lot longer than what I just read, obviously. If you haven't already seen it, you're definitely going to want to. It's another good promo by Roman Reigns, and just another good segment altogether that includes Adam Pearce and his whole basically getting bullied. I mean, he gets backed up into the corner outside of the ring by Roman Reigns at one point during all of this. So if you're into that, it is definitely something that's going to be up your alley. But like I said, what I took away from this was we get qualifying matches. That's what was announced by Adam Pearce. He says that there will be qualifying matches, which is a lot more interesting than just announcing who's going to be inside of the chamber. And it makes the spots feel more valuable and like they were actually earned. So whenever the chamber's going on, you can kind of remember how each wrestler got there, and not just that the match was announced. That's kind of what happened on Raw. And they do it a little bit different tonight on SmackDown, and we're going to get to all of those qualifying matches and each individual qualifier, I guess you can say, as the night gets on or moves on. But next we get a backstage segment with Adam Pearce and Sonya Deville. And Adam Pearce kind of is he comes up to her and he's kind of panicking as if they're in some big hurry to make the participants for the Elimination Chamber match like the pay-per-views this Sunday. And that's just one thing that I thought was kind of weird. I mean, they still have over a week, and he was kind of panicking like the deadline was tonight or something. And maybe it was for his personal job, but I don't really know. That wasn't announced, so I thought that was kind of weird. But I feel like this was actually Sonya's best night in this current role that she's been in. She actually pitches a pretty good idea and proves that she's definitely capable of handling this quote-unquote authority role. But her idea, it was actually that we have a tag team qualifying match for the Elimination Chamber where the winners will both earn an individual spot in the chamber. So basically, you know, the saying kill two birds with one stone, that's pretty much what they're doing, just trying to get two spots knocked out in one match. It's smart if you're trying to hurry up and book this thing like they apparently are trying to do. And the match that she's referring to is actually right up next. It's the Mysterios versus Corbin and Sami Zayn. And Sami actually cuts a pretty good pre-match promo. I liked it. I wanted to provide audio, but obviously they didn't have the video up there for some reason. They probably don't think it's very important. I wish they did, though, because I would love for you guys to hear it. So if you didn't, that's definitely one that I would want you guys to go listen to. But once the match was announced, I already knew that Corbin and Sami were going to win. It just makes sense. They're both way, more legit in their current roles in WWE right now, obviously. So I just kind of knew, and I'm sure everybody else did as well, so I'm not alone in that by any means. But one thing I noticed in this match is Dominic actually does, I think it's a form of like a suicide dive through the ropes. It's pretty early in the match, actually, before the match really even gets going. And he actually hits his face or his head on the announce table pretty hard. I mean, he's lucky he didn't get hurt there. That's one thing I noticed. It was probably his first real scare, at least that I've seen on TV. So he's definitely going to want to be careful. He's going to look back at that and be counting his lucky stars that he didn't hit his face on the corner there, maybe hit his eye or anything like that, because then that whole Mysterio losing an eye storyline might turn a little bit more real than they were hoping. So anyways, this match continues with Corbin and Ray end up out on the outside of the ring after Ray and Dominic hit a double 619 on Corbin. And then Zayn gets Dominic right where he wants him, one-on-one in the ring. And that was pretty much like the Super Bowl all over again. I mean, it was just an onslaught. It was over almost immediately after Sami Zayn hits the haluva kick. So Corbin and Sami qualify for the chamber, making the announced participants up to this point Jey Uso, Kevin Owens, Baron Corbin, and Sami Zayn. So 4 out of the 6 spots were filled, and it's definitely a little bit heel heavy up to this point, so we will see how the night unfolds, and it definitely gets a little bit more even. But next we get a backstage segment with Sonya and Adam Pearce again, and this time it's with the SmackDown Tag Team Champions, Ziggler and Roode. And Ziggler and Roode, like you would expect, make their pitch to get the final 2 spots just given to them in the Elimination Chamber. And she responds by saying that they can earn their spot, very similar to how Sami and Corbin did, by defeating the team of Cesaro and Daniel Bryan later on tonight. And they're going to try to do the exact same thing, get 2 spots knocked out in one match. I think that's actually pretty smart, especially if all the wrestlers are respectable. I can definitely get behind that. So moving on here, we get another match, and this one's with Big E. And it's apparently, it's an open challenge. We didn't really know who it was going to be against. I expected it to be against Apollo Crews after things kind of unfold a little bit and he comes out, but before the match actually starts, Big E cuts a promo about the Bucks winning the Super Bowl, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, as a Falcons fan, I do not care about the Bucks whatsoever, so sorry if there are any Bucks fans out there. It's nothing personal. As you know, just division rivalries, but anyway. Apollo, like I said, he comes out and interrupts him, and the two have an interesting and intense off-mic exchange where Big E tells him that he's given him multiple chances at the Intercontinental Championship, and like is very true, he's failed every single time. And then Apollo makes the plea that as long as Big E has that championship, he's not going to give up and he's not going to be able to get rid of him. But Big E doesn't care, and he says bring out his next challenger, who ends up being Shinsuke Nakamura. So we get a Shinsuke versus Big E match here. And it doesn't really take long for Big E, because Apollo Crews stays out there. So it really doesn't take long for Apollo Crews to get involved, cheap shot Big E, and cause a disqualification. So like we've been anticipating, heel Apollo Crews is pretty much here. So let's just hope that WWE and Apollo will make the most of it. I don't think he's going to beat Big E, but he could still look good in a losing effort and build off of this program. So that's really what I'm looking for. And maybe just finding a little bit of ground, because Apollo Crews, like I've said here in the recent episodes, he's definitely somebody who I hope has a bigger role going forward. He's definitely somebody who needs a character change, and it looks like they're finally going all in on that, like his counterpart tonight, Big E. So let's hope that it is not fumbled and they can handle this thing well, or handle this thing the right way, and we get a more serious and legitimate Apollo Crews going forward. And up next here, we get the much-anticipated Seth Rollins welcome back party. And I was actually kind of surprised. The entire SmackDown roster, basically most of the entire roster, came out to ringside and surrounded it kind of like a lumberjack match just to watch Seth Rollins, that came out kind of weird. Similar to how they've done in the past, where he kind of just starts belittling every single one of the wrestlers who's standing out there one by one and just basically making them feel like crap. They kind of do something similar. This time they're out there standing around the ring for him to come out, and then he begins his speech by asking himself where he belongs on this current SmackDown roster. And then he quickly reminds himself that, and everybody else, that he's still the leader that SmackDown needs, and that we should all embrace the vision. It seems like that's his new saying. They had it on the Jumbotron whenever he came out, and he mentioned it several times in his promo. So embrace the vision. That's definitely the thing to remember. He's going to probably say it a lot here in the coming weeks. But as he continues his speech, almost all the wrestlers who were out there watching ringside, they kind of made their way to the back, and they were already pretty much just fed up with what Seth had to say. All of them except for Cesaro, though. He stayed out there a little bit longer than everybody else and kind of just looked at Seth, shakes his head, and tries to walk off up the ramp. Apparently Seth doesn't like that, though, because he flips out and then attacks Cesaro from behind, which leads to him beating Cesaro pretty good until Daniel Bryan comes out to the rescue and runs Seth off. So that attack obviously is going to come into effect a little bit later, because Cesaro already had a match announced, a qualifying match with Daniel Bryan, so they can both earn themselves a spot in the Elimination Chamber. So Seth Rollins looking to rain a little bit on Cesaro's parade. I actually thought that maybe this was going to be a way for Seth Rollins to sneak his way into the Royal Rumble, trying to move on here. The Royal Rumble being so close, I guess that's still in my mind a little bit, but anyway, the Elimination Chamber. It looks like I thought that Seth Rollins might be trying to kind of weasel his way into that, but that was not the case. And we will certainly get to that qualifying match a little bit later. But before we do that, we get Bayley versus Liv Morgan with Ruby Riott in her corner. And as you guys know, I'm a huge Liv Morgan fan, so I was definitely looking forward to this match and seeing how Liv does against somebody like Bayley. And I was actually pretty impressed. She definitely held her own. She took a pretty rough spot outside of the ring where she kind of threw herself into the barricade after jumping over the steps. That was definitely a spot where I kind of rewinded it to make sure that she was all right, and she definitely was, but that looked rough live. But anyway, Billie Kay comes out eventually as this match is going on to apologize to Ruby Riott for last week and obviously offer her resume like she always does. And after Ruby tries to politely say that this isn't a good time, Billie refuses to take no for an answer and continues to annoy Ruby until she loses it and then grabs the resumes out of Billie's hand in an attempt to throw them on the ground, but unfortunately a handful of them kind of landed in the ring and made the official look away and get distracted. Bayley took advantage of that and poked Liv in the eye and then hit the Bayley to belly and picked up the win over Liv Morgan. My thoughts on this match, like I said, I loved how Liv looked. She was very strong, or this was a strong performance by her. Bayley didn't even get the clean win, so I mean, Liv really isn't even hurt by this loss, and I really like that. Billie Kay, however, she continues to kind of be a thorn in the side of Ruby and Liv, just the Riot Squad as a whole. She wants to join or whatever. But you have to think that at some point this is going to reach its boiling point. It's almost to the point where I would rather them just do backstage stuff with Billie and the Riot Squad, because they're kind of just getting a little bit repetitive whenever they come out to the ring and she's a guest on commentary or something like that, and she just kind of interferes. I just feel like they're kind of feeding a fed horse is another way to say that. So I feel like they're kind of beating that into the ground, and I think there's a lot more to do there, and I just don't want them to waste an opportunity here by refusing to, I guess, do something different with what they got there. So moving on here, we get another backstage interview. This time it's Kayla Braxton with Cesaro and Daniel Bryan, and she asks Cesaro if he's still going to be able to compete tonight after Seth Rollins' attack. He says yes, and that basically Seth Rollins wasted all of our time earlier with his fake embrace the vision nonsense. Cesaro obviously not buying into Seth Rollins and what he's saying, and that's definitely a feud that I'll get behind. I would not mind seeing that leading up to WrestleMania and maybe even being on the WrestleMania card, so I will definitely keep an eye on that. Moving on here, we get a tag team match with the Street Profits versus Otis and Gable. Part of me was thinking as this match was going on, or at least as the match was starting, Montez Ford has to be at least a little bit motivated to take his game to another level after seeing his wife's recent success. I mean, obviously he's extremely happy for her, but just, I mean, he has to look at that and just be like, man, I want to be in that spot. I want her to be happy for me like I'm happy for her, and I want to experience that. I mean, that's why he got in the business, so I could definitely see maybe Montez Ford, kicking things up a notch and taking his game to another level. But after a decent match here where Otis and Gable actually looked like they had a little bit of chemistry as a tag team, Ford hit his splash from the heavens to pick up the win for the Street Profits. There really wasn't anything to take from this match at all. It was kind of just a filler to get these guys on TV, but I'm not complaining. I mean, from what we can see, this is two sets of tag teams who are officially tag teams. And we'll get another one later, and I'll get a little bit to that as well. But it's just something I can definitely like to see. I want to see the SmackDown. I want to see it on both shows, really, but definitely on SmackDown. Just the tag team division get a little bit more deep, or just whatever word you want to use. I just want there to be more tag teams. I want there to be good storylines and not just kind of recycled three teams here and there just doing the same thing over and over again, where it really doesn't matter who has the titles because you know that nothing meaningful is going to come from that storyline. I feel like that can definitely stop if you have the right tag teams with the right stories. So hopefully that's something that we can see going forward. But continuing down the line here, we get Sasha Banks, and she's in the ring talking about Bianca Belair and how there's really only one choice for her to make at WrestleMania, and it's obviously Sasha versus Bianca. I've said that myself. Everybody agrees that's the match that needs to happen. And then Bianca comes out, and eventually Nia and Shayna come out for really no reason except to remind us all about the whole My Whole thing. But this is where I kind of want to give my thoughts here about Nia Jax. Okay, I actually had to stop and catch my breath here. Now, okay, whenever Nia came out, I was actually kind of excited. I told my roommate, all right, I've been waiting for Nia to show up on SmackDown just so I can give my thoughts on her, because I do have a little bit of things to say about Nia Jax. Well, for one, I mean, the whole My Whole thing, I mean, first things first, I want to say I don't want to, if you think that's funny, I don't want to, say you're wrong for thinking that's funny or that it's necessarily not funny. It's not funny to me, I guess. I mean, and so just for basically the whole internet community or every single wrestler that I've seen, even some fans, to treat that whole my whole situation like it's the caveman finding the first your mom joke was just blasphemy. It was preposterous if you want me to use a bigger word. I don't know. Like I said, I don't want to, belittle it or basically say that if you think it's funny, it's wrong, because that's not what I'm trying to do. Just me personally, it doesn't really sit with me, and that's kind of, they definitely wanted to make that a focal point tonight. But just as far as Nia herself, I don't even really know where to start. As far as her in the ring, I'm not a fan of Nia Jax at all. I'm really not a fan of her personally either. I've definitely seen some episodes of Total Divas before where she kind of shows her personal side, or just at least her her real side maybe. I don't know if she's trying to portray that character or whatever on TV. But she's basically like a bully. Like, she's a bully in real life. She's just has that, my what doesn't stink, I'm better than you look. She'll give you a dirty look if you walk by. She's one of those girls. So whenever she laughs on the internet and basically makes everybody else feel stupid and like we're the idiots for pointing out how bad she is in the ring, because I want to be very clear here when I say that Nia Jax stinks in the ring. Like, she absolutely stinks. She's not good. She's hashtag not good at wrestling. So I don't care. I'm sorry if you're a Nia Jax fan, but she's just simply not good. She's injured several wrestlers. I don't know if you guys seen the most recent clip about where she slams Dana Brooke. That was definitely dangerous. I've seen a lot of people comment on that on the internet. That's just a long list of things that Nia Jax has done. She's just, she's not a safe person to work with. So for her to actually comment on other people injuring people in the ring, I just feel like that's hilarious. And I don't know, just, she doesn't do it for me at all as far as her character goes. There's absolutely nothing to it. People claim that she's like one of the strongest women in wrestling. That might be true, but who cares? Do you really have to be that strong? Most of the women in the women's division, they're not very big girls. You don't have to be that strong. So it's not like that strength is such a big advantage whenever any other wrestler that's on the roster can do the same thing that she's doing as far as picking up these other girls, throwing them around, whatever. You get what I'm saying, is that her strength really doesn't, she doesn't really use it to her advantage at all. The move she does is basically like a little Hulk Hogan leg drop, if that's what you want to call it. But I don't know. I don't want this to turn into a complete Nia Jax rant. I definitely wanted to give my thoughts. There were a couple times in recent episodes that I wanted to kind of, put my 2 cents in on how I felt about Nia Jax, but I like to keep this show basically SmackDown related completely, unless something crazy happens on Raw or whatever. I didn't want to just go out of my way to throw shade at Nia Jax, but hey, if you're going to come on the SmackDown and I got to cover you on the SmackDown review, I'm definitely going to tell you how I feel about it. So I'm sorry if I hurt anybody's feelings out there who is a Nia Jax fan. That wasn't my intention. Like I've said many times, I'm not trying to, I don't really know. I really don't care for Nia Jax. I'm not trying to, just be completely disrespectful towards her. But just seeing somebody whose personality is like that and then translating into her wrestling character, it's just, I don't know. She's not my cup of tea at all. And she just completely stayed on Raw for as long as she's in the WWE. That would be perfectly fine with me. I would not complain whatsoever. So yeah, she really didn't do anything meaningful here on SmackDown. I guess they just wanted to make sure that maybe the people who only watch SmackDown and don't watch Raw, I doubt there's any people out there who do that, but she wanted to make sure that all audiences got to hear the hilarious My Whole joke. So moving on here, we get the main event, which is a tag team match, a qualifying match for the Elimination Chamber for the final 2 spots. It's Dolph Ziggler and Robert Roode versus Cesaro and Daniel Bryan. And with this match here, kind of similar to what I said about the tag team match earlier with the Street Profits and Otis and Gable, I really like how Ziggler and Roode have gone all in with their current spot as a tag team. They've changed their theme song, they've got matching gear, so I can definitely appreciate the commitment, especially how thin the tag team division is. It's good to see a team take it serious and maybe actually feel like they want to be there, so I definitely like seeing that from the champions. As far as the match goes, Cesaro was already beaten up, obviously, from his attack earlier from Seth Rollins, so Daniel Bryan and Cesaro were at a little bit of a disadvantage from the start. Sami and Corbin eventually come out to ringside for a closer view, but Cesaro's injuries really don't even slow him down that much. Similar to last week, he hits another combination of a spine buster followed by a spin and a sharpshooter to make one half of the reigning tag team champions tap out and get a pretty clean win. Cesaro continues his little bit of a hot streak heading into WrestleMania, but as soon as the match ends, Jey Uso comes out and attacks Cesaro with a steel chair. Sami Zayn and Corbin join in and start to attack Daniel Bryan outside of the ring, and then, like you probably would expect, Sami Zayn eventually turns on Baron Corbin, causing an all-out brawl. Kevin Owens eventually comes out and starts to clean house. I mean, he absolutely stuns every single person in the ring, or everyone in sight. And then he grabs a chair, sit in the middle of the ring, and declares to Roman Reigns that he's not going anywhere and he's coming for him. And as far as the Elimination Chamber goes, with Kevin Owens being one of the guys in there, I would be pretty surprised if anybody but him won, considering there's probably going to be no build for the match since it's obviously going to be happening later that night. There's already an entrenched storyline with Kevin Owens and Roman Reigns, and with the way that the last match ended, it kind of left a bad taste in our mouth with how badly it was botched. So I think maybe they can fix that a little bit to maybe have us have a little bit more fond memories with how that program ended. But either way, Roman Reigns is going to walk out of Elimination Chamber as the Universal Champion. And if everything goes kind of how I see it going, or at least how I would expect it to go, I think that maybe the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view goes off the air with Roman Reigns getting speared by Edge, and Edge picking up the Universal Championship and pointing at the WrestleMania sign, declaring, without necessarily saying a word, that Roman Reigns is going to be the champion that he challenges. I think that's the best way to go. Heel versus babyface. It just keeps things pretty simple. Spear versus spear, however you want to look at it. I think it'll be a match that we can all get excited for, and it'll check another guy off of Edge's bucket list who he likely wants to face in his last stint with the WWE. So I think there's a lot of reasons why they should go this direction. I think there's a lot of reasons why they're going to go this direction. So we just basically have to wait and see if they're going to try to swerve us by any way. Maybe Miz with the Money in the Bank. I mean, he has to cash it in. We're pretty much going to get only a couple months without that briefcase being relevant whenever I think it's May or maybe June, whenever the next Money in the Bank pay-per-view is. So the belt or the briefcase is going to be on somebody else here pretty soon. So we need to maybe hurry up and get that off of Miz pretty soon. Otherwise, we're just going to have a full year with the Money in the Bank briefcase being in the back of our minds, and probably going on a second year with the other pay-per-view coming up. So before I get off topic too much, that was the SmackDown review, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. And we are going to get to this top 5 pay-per-views that WWE should bring back right now. And like always, I have a few honorable mentions here. So we're going to get to those. And I'm just going to start off by saying that a few of them are kind of obviously not going to get brought back. I just kind of wanted to give them a little bit of a shout out, a little bit of recognition. A lot of people either are fans of them or haven't heard of them. Either way, if you are a fan, you get a little bit of reminded. And if you have never heard of it, it gives you something to go look on the WWE Network, and I am pretty sure you're not going to be disappointed. But we will start here with the honorable mentions. We'll start with ECW One Night Stand. Those are always pretty good. I love the true, like, brand split, I guess you want to say. Like, anytime it's like Raw versus SmackDown and it's actually true, not the Survivor Series bullcrap they give us now, but like whenever it was actually ECW versus WCW for an entire pay-per-view, and when JBL would come out and cut his promo basically just completely destroying all the ECW fans and their style of wrestling and all that, and you know that a lot of that was pretty real feelings. The fans absolutely hated him. There was some pretty close calls with, fans flipping him off, spitting at him. Things were definitely a lot different back then, but the ECW One Night Stand obviously probably never going to be back, strictly because there's really no ECW wrestlers still around. I know RVD's still out there doing his thing. I'm sure Sabu's somewhere out there doing a little bit too, but I'm sure it'd be pretty hard to find a lot of the mainstays that used to, really make ECW what it once was. Another honorable mention here is New Year's Revolution. I thought that was a pretty cool pay-per-view whenever it existed, no matter what day it falls on, especially nowadays. We have NFL games being postponed, played on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, whatever. I feel like it wouldn't be hard to just have a pay-per-view on New Year's Day every year. So kind of we all get to start our year watching a wrestling pay-per-view. I think that would be pretty cool. It would be a pretty cool tradition to maybe have 2 pay-per-views in January, have the Royal Rumble at the very end, New Year's Revolution at the very beginning. That'd be pretty cool to have, but I am not going to get my hopes up there. Another pay-per-view I think would be pretty cool to bring back is Bragging Rights. And really for none other reason but so Roman or Survivor Series can go back to being what it used to be, and they can still get their Raw versus SmackDown forced bullcrap that they give us. They can use Bragging Rights for that and give us Survivor Series so we can have actually some meaningful stuff and actually look forward to it like we used to. So for that reason only, I would be very cool, or I would be very on board with Bragging Rights coming back. Another one for honorable mention is Cyber Sunday. This pay-per-view, it's definitely wasn't going to make the top 5, but I wanted to mention it just strictly because I'm surprised they haven't brought it back just in the day and age of how big social media is, getting people involved, making the fans feel like they have a say-so in the matches, whether we did or not. I know that I myself, back when it was Taboo Tuesday or Cyber Sunday, whichever one it was, I remember being in school, getting on the computers and voting all the time, so that would be pretty cool to have something like that come back. And the last honorable mention I want to say is Night of Champions. I'd kind of want that to come back in place of the Clash of Champions. I don't really, just the name. It's something small, but it doesn't really sit as well as Night of Champions did. So if they were to go back to that, I definitely would not complain. But now that the honorable mentions are out of the way, we're going to get right into the top 5 pay-per-views that WWE should bring back. Now, keep in mind, just because I say that they should bring them back doesn't mean that I think that they will bring them back. I know for a fact that at least 2 of these on this top 5 are not going to be brought back for whatever reason. And number 5 here is one of them, and it's Armageddon. The pay-per-view that used to take place in December. It was always the last pay-per-view of the year, kind of right before Royal Rumble. It was that pay-per-view between Survivor Series and Royal Rumble. They always had kind of like this, at least for a few years there, the years that I was really watching it, they always had the same theme song. And it's actually a theme song that NXT actually used for one of their pay-per-views not too long ago. I'm not really sure which one it is. I wish I knew, because it was for a Karrion Kross video package. They used that theme song. If any of you guys know exactly what I'm talking about, please reach out to me. I know what it's called. I can play it on here if you guys want me to, but I just want to know if any of you guys know what I'm talking about. But anyway, Armageddon. And also here, I want to give you guys a notable match on each one of these pay-per-views, just, in case you guys want to go back and at least get a little bit of a taste of each one of these pay-per-views that I mentioned. I put down one match that I remember watching and that was pretty impactful. Most of them are from the year 2004, just going to be honest with you up front. There's one from the year 2003. Those were the 2 big years in my wrestling fandom. So on my top 5, obviously they're going to be pretty heavily featured. The Armageddon match that I want to make sure you guys know about is 2003, the triple threat match for the World Heavyweight Championship, Triple H versus Kane versus Goldberg. I thought this match was pretty awesome. As you guys know, I was a pretty big Goldberg fan, especially during this time. And before everybody comes at me and thinks I'm some psycho, obviously I want to make sure that it's very clear that we're talking about 2003 here. This is whenever I was really pushing for Goldberg to be the World Heavyweight Champion. I loved the him versus Evolution storylines. That's what really kept me watching Raw every week. And this is where Goldberg lost the World Heavyweight Championship and ultimately never got it back. And also, Triple H is going to be pretty featured in these as well as far as the notable matches. It's no coincidence. He's one of the greatest heels, especially in this era, so he's definitely going to be involved. So moving on here, number 4 is another one that's probably never going to be brought back, and that's Bad Blood. I feel like the name itself is probably why it's not going to be brought back, but the name itself was so meaningful for what the pay-per-view meant. This was a pay-per-view that feuds got blown off at. This was a pay-per-view that basically the most heated of heated programs came to this pay-per-view to basically settle it, and that's what happened here with the notable match I want you guys to know about is 2004 Hell in a Cell, Triple H versus Shawn Michaels. I mean, this match has got to be at least 45 minutes long. It is an absolute bloodbath. It's what you would expect. The video package leading up to it, I definitely recommend watching it because I can specifically remember that Triple H and Shawn Michaels were beating the hell out of each other for at least a couple months leading up to this. And Eric Bischoff, as they were split up in the corners of the ring, kind of finally says, you two are going to fight at Hell in a Cell. And at this point, it had been a while since we'd seen a Hell in a Cell. I know Triple H was in a Hell in a Cell versus Kevin Nash at the Bad Blood before this. That might actually be the last time we saw it, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Either way, you guys definitely should go watch that match if you haven't already seen it. And up next, maybe ranked a little bit too high, considering that there really is no, with what its name is, there's no play on words. It kind of just is, it is what it is. It's just a random pay-per-view that was in the fall. It came every September, and that's Unforgiven. It came right after SummerSlam every year, and I really, really enjoyed this pay-per-view. I mean, obviously, like I just said a little bit ago, Goldberg was one of my favorite wrestlers during this time. And in the 2003 Unforgiven, he won the World Heavyweight Championship against Triple H that he eventually lost at Armageddon. So he only had it for a few months, but the Unforgiven pay-per-view, I guess that moment in particular is why the pay-per-view sticks out to me so much. But for whatever reason, that's one pay-per-view that I would certainly like for them to bring back. I mean, just for nostalgia reasons. I mean, why not? You have all these pay-per-views, like I've said before, TLC, Elimination Chamber, Money in the Bank. Come on, which other one? I know there's some more. Hell in a Cell. Gosh, come on. I know there's more than 4. I don't know. Either way, why not just bring back these pay-per-view names, especially the ones that aren't necessarily bad, like these next ones I'm about to mention. But I just feel like they are every year wasting these pay-per-view names by continuing to give us these just gimmick pay-per-views that are terrible. I do really quickly here want to give a quick shout-out to NXT for bringing back Vengeance. I didn't really get to mention that in my honorable mentions. I should have, because I mean, it's not necessarily just straight up Vengeance. It's called NXT Vengeance Day, but still the logo's pretty similar to the old Vengeance pay-per-view that used to be in June. And I like how NXT also is, they brought back the Great American Bash, Halloween Havoc. NXT, I mean, I'm perfectly fine with you bringing these pay-per-views back and just strictly keeping them on NXT, because then at least I have a reason, or at least I know why they're not being used other than, well, we want to do these gimmick matches, so this is what we're going to do, so I would much rather them be used on NXT than not at all. But, I mean, I feel like, why not just get them back on the main roster? That's where they were whenever they were originally existed. So there's no reason not to have them back on the main roster. And also, Backlash and No Mercy. Those are 2 pay-per-views that WWE has resurrected and put back into their yearly schedule. Hopefully that trend will continue and they'll keep bringing these back. But before I get too off topic here, we're going to move on to number 2, and that's actually the May pay-per-view that used to happen, and that's Judgment Day. Now, he's not in my notable match that I wanted you guys to go watch, and actually, before I forget, the notable match for Unforgiven at number 3 was Triple H versus Randy Orton in 2004. It was only a month after Randy Orton captured his World Heavyweight Championship against Chris Benoit, so he lost the title very quickly after winning it for the first time. But that's the notable match. If you guys want to watch it, you can go watch that one or the one before that. There's also some other good Unforgiven matches if you guys just want to go take a look. But number 2 here, Judgment Day. This was a pay-per-view at May, and he's not in my notable match, but this pay-per-view for some reason just reminds me of Undertaker. I mean, it was always a SmackDown pay-per-view, so that probably has a lot to do with it. I'm sure he had a lot of big matches on this pay-per-view. But the match that I have as a notable one for you guys to go check out, I'm sure you guys already know, 2004 WWE Championship, Eddie Guerrero versus JBL. This was another brutal bloodbath, especially for or I think this might have actually been when JBL was just starting his pretty long run, if I'm not mistaken. So this, if you actually want to, or if you have nothing to watch, like no shows to binge or anything like that, this would be a good place to start as far as binging if you wanted to really see a really good heel. Although I really wouldn't start at this point because there's a lot of good stuff you would miss. I would actually start at the very beginning of 2002. That's a great spot to watch. Just go look up whenever the first ever WWE draft was, with Ric Flair drafting for Raw, I believe, and Vince McMahon drafting for SmackDown. That's probably the one I would watch if I were you. But anyway, before we get too off topic, Judgment Day is one that I could see them bringing back. I mean, the name itself doesn't really have any reason why they can't. It was a good pay-per-view. I'm fine with it just being on one show. And that's another thing I want to say here with these pay-per-views and why they actually meant a little bit more is because basically a lot of these pay-per-views were one brand specific. Like Armageddon was Raw, Bad Blood was Raw, Unforgiven was Raw, and Judgment Day was SmackDown. And number one's a SmackDown pay-per-view as well. But it forced WWE to long-term book a little bit more because they didn't have a pay-per-view every month to just blow these things off. These programs had to last every other month, and then of course you'd get lucky with the two brand pay-per-views like the Big Four, SummerSlam, Survivor Series, Royal Rumble, and obviously WrestleMania. So then they would get lucky by maybe having a back-to-back, but I just feel like the schedule was so much better back then. It was so much more easy to navigate. It was easy to keep up with. You knew exactly what pay-per-views were coming up. There were no gimmick nonsense that would just kind of takes you out of the moment and let you know what's really going on. I just feel like they can do a lot with these pay-per-views, and that's why it's an area that I hope maybe improves a little bit under Peacock. I don't know if that even is a thing for me to even think about because I'm not sure if they even really correlate, but because they're going to be somewhere besides the WWE Network, maybe we can see a little bit of improvement because WWE might want to be basically firing on all cylinders as they are introduced to a completely new audience with the whole Peacock thing. But continuing on here in the top 5, we're going to get to the number 1 pay-per-view that WWE should bring back. And it's actually a pay-per-view that we would be at right now in real time if it was still here. This is the pay-per-view that we would be getting ready to head into in February, and that's No Way Out. The pay-per-view right before WrestleMania. It always had some big matches on it. It was always just that one pay-per-view that gets you ready for WrestleMania. I can't really think of a No Way Out pay-per-view that didn't deliver. And the match that I want you guys to go watch for sure, I know for a fact Matt's already done a wrestling nostalgia on this match, and that's 2004 WWE Championship, Eddie Guerrero versus Brock Lesnar. And he wins this match with the help of Goldberg, and that's a whole nother storyline for a different day, but Goldberg does help Eddie Guerrero, and he does pick up the win, and he eventually goes on to WrestleMania and beats Kurt Angle, and just the best WrestleMania of all time. I'll go on record saying that. Of course, I'm probably going to get, a little bit of backlash because I know there's a couple WrestleManias that happened before that whenever I wasn't necessarily, hardcore into the WWE. So I understand that I probably missed some pretty good WrestleManias. And I know for a fact I have actually because I've gone back and watched some pretty big matches from that era. So I know that WrestleMania 20 definitely has some competition around that time. That just shows you how good of an era that was in wrestling to have that many WrestleManias consecutively that people can look at and say, damn, that was the best of all time. Some WrestleManias that we see these days just go completely just off the scope. They just go off the radar. You don't really remember many matches or many moments, maybe one per WrestleMania. You remember the stage. That's pretty much it for me anyway. But there you guys have it. That is my top 5 pay-per-views that WWE should bring back. I doubt they will. They probably won't bring back any. Maybe we can count on NXT to continue their trend to bring these pay-per-views back. If they do, then NXT will really, not that they don't already, but they will really get a new fan out of me if they can continue to bring back these pay-per-views. So I like what I'm seeing from them as of lately with bringing back Vengeance and the Great American Bash and In Your House and all those pay-per-views. Just keep it up. Good work from NXT. But that was the SmackDown review. That was the top 5. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We're going to be back next week, probably with an Elimination Chamber theme top 5. I kind of wanted to do it this week, but with the whole NXT Vengeance Day pay-per-view coming up, that made me want to really dive into the whole pay-per-view avenue and let you guys know kind of what I thought about there. got a little bit of a Nia Jax rant in here. I definitely wanted to do that. I feel like that's a little bit overdue. But other than that, guys, I feel like this was a pretty good episode of SmackDown. Only got one more before Elimination Chamber, and then things are really going to heat up. The WrestleMania card's really going to take shape, and we can actually start looking forward to matches that are actually booked and not fantasy booked. So with that being said, I hope you guys all have a great weekend. It's about to snow pretty heavy where I'm from, where I'm at right now in Texas, which, as you can expect, doesn't really happen that often. So we're kind of getting prepared to deal with all that. We're getting like 6 to 9 inches or something like that. Definitely not normal around these parts, so I am not looking forward to that. I absolutely hate the cold weather. But it's just something that we got to deal with, so I'm not going to make you guys hear any more about that. I hope you guys have a great weekend. And with that being said, guys, I will talk to you next week.